It's just old jewelry, Dad. Move on already. My son David's cruel dismissal echoed through my Boston kitchen as he stood there, completely indifferent to the devastation he'd caused. Margaret had been dead only 6 months, my wife of 41 years, and our son had already stolen her most precious possession. The delicate silver locket that had rested against her heart every day of our marriage was gone, sold to some pawnshop for gambling money. David thought he was stealing worthless sentiment, but he'd actually triggered the most elaborate protection plan ever devised. Hidden in that locket were secrets worth millions and proof of his scheme to rob me blind. My deceased wife had spent her final years preparing for this exact moment, and David was about to discover that Margaret Ellison never lost a fight. Comment below, and let me know where you're watching from around the world. Have you ever had someone protect you in ways you never knew about? Margaret's secret recordings were about to unleash a justice that would our entire family, and what happened next will restore your faith in true love. It's just jewelry, Dad. Get over it. Those were the words that shattered my world. My son David stood in my Boston kitchen, arms crossed, completely unbothered by what he'd just done. 6 months after burying Margaret, my wife of 41 years, and my own son had stolen her locket, the one thing I held onto, the one piece of her I touched every morning while drinking my coffee. The delicate silver chain that had rested against her heart for 4 decades was gone, sold to some pawn shop for what David called practical money. But what David didn't know was that Margaret's locket held more than just our wedding photo. I stared at him, my hands still wet from washing dishes, Margaret's favorite coffee mug trembling in my grip. The mug she'd used every morning, the one with the faded Boston Harbor sunset that she'd bought on our honeymoon. Everything in this house held her memory, and now he was taking those memories away piece by piece. You sold your mother's locket without asking me, I said, my voice barely steady. David's wife, Jessica, looked up from her phone with that particular expression she'd perfected over the years, the one that said she was dealing with a difficult child rather than her 75-year-old father-in-law. Honestly, Grant, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, clinging to material possessions isn't healthy. Margaret wouldn't want you living in the past. Don't tell me what Margaret would want, I thought, but bit my tongue. Jessica had been telling me what Margaret would want since the funeral, usually whenever it involved me giving them something. Which pawn shop? I asked quietly. David checked his expensive Apple Watch. Probably cost more than Margaret's locket was worth to him. Murphy's on Hanover Street. They gave me $200. Not bad for something that old. $200. For a silver locket that Margaret had worn every single day of our marriage, except the day she died, when the hospital handed it to me in a plastic bag with her wedding ring. The locket her grandmother had given her on her 18th birthday. The one she'd touched whenever she was nervous or thinking about something important. That locket was worth at least $1,200, I said. It was sterling silver with hand-engraved details. Jessica snorted. In what universe? It wasn't even shiny anymore, because it had been worn with love for 41 years. Because Margaret had rubbed it smooth with her fingers during every difficult moment of our marriage. Because it had absorbed 4 decades of her hopes, her fears, her prayers. But they wouldn't understand that. David and Jessica lived in a world where everything had a price tag, and nothing had a memory. I'm going to get it back, I announced. Good luck with that, David said, heading for the door. We fly out tomorrow morning. Jessica's been planning this Vegas trip for months. Vegas. Of course. My son was funding his gambling addiction by selling his dead mother's jewelry. Jessica followed him, pausing at the door with that fake sympathetic expression she wore whenever she wanted to seem caring. Grant, you really should consider therapy. This obsession with Margaret's things isn't normal. The door slammed, leaving me alone with the bitter taste of betrayal and the silence that had become my constant companion since Margaret died. But here's what David and Jessica didn't know about their obsessed old father. I'd spent 40 years as an accountant. I knew the difference between giving up and strategic planning, and I was done giving up. More importantly, they had no idea what Margaret had been planning in the months before she died. The secret meetings, the hushed phone calls, the way she'd started touching that locket more frequently, like she was checking to make sure it was still there. Margaret had always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Even in death, she was still protecting me. I just had to figure out how. The next morning, I drove through Boston's North End with a determination I hadn't felt since Margaret's diagnosis. Murphy's pawn shop sat wedged between an Italian bakery and a barber shop on Hanover Street, the kind of cramped, dusty place where family treasures went to die. The man behind the counter had arms covered in tattoos, and the weary expression of someone who'd heard every sob story imaginable. His name tag read Danny Murphy. "You hear about the silver locket?" he asked, before I even spoke. "How did you know?" "Your son called this morning. Said his old man might show up making trouble." Danny shrugged apologetically. "Look, Mr. Ellison, I feel for you, but business is business. I paid fair market value. Fair market value. $200 for 41 years of Margaret touching that locket every morning. For the countless times I'd watched her fingers trace its surface when she was worried or thinking. I'll buy it back. Whatever you need." Danny's face fell. "It's already sold. Guy came in an hour after we opened, paid cash. No returns in this business." My heart sank. Some stranger was walking around Boston with Margaret's locket, while my son gambled away our memories in Vegas. "But here's the thing," Danny continued, lowering his voice. "We found something strange when we cleaned it up for sale." He disappeared into a back room and returned with a small manila envelope. There was a hidden compartment behind the photo. Professional work had to be done by a real jeweler. Found this tucked inside. Inside, the envelope was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. In Margaret's precise handwriting, Grant's birthday, September 22nd, 1948, the day I knew I'd love him forever. Below that, a series of numbers and letters. SS 4457 BH9 122 millisecond. I stared at the paper, my hands trembling. Margaret had never mentioned any hidden compartment. In 4 decades of marriage, she'd kept this secret pressed against her heart every single day. "You recognize those numbers?" Danny asked. I shook my head, but they looked familiar somehow, like a password or account number. Margaret had always been methodical about important information, writing everything down in her careful script. "The man who bought the locket," I said suddenly. "What did he look like?" Danny's expression grew guarded. "Why do you ask?" "Because my wife hid this message for a reason. I think whoever bought that locket knew exactly what he was looking for." Danny studied my face for a long moment. He was older, maybe 65. Well-dressed, spoke like he had education. When I mentioned finding something inside, he got very interested. Asked specific questions about what we'd discovered. A chill crept down my spine. "Did he give a name?" "Cash transaction, no paperwork needed." Danny paused. "But he asked specifically about jewelry that came in yesterday. Said he collected vintage pieces from estate sales. Someone had been watching for Margaret's locket to surface. But who? And how did they know about the hidden compartment? "One more thing," Danny added quietly. Before he left, he asked if anyone else knew about what we'd found. When I said no, he seemed relieved. I thanked Danny and walked to my car, Margaret's coded message burning in my pocket. The autumn wind cut through my jacket as I sat behind the steering wheel, staring at her handwriting. Margaret had hidden this secret for decades. From me. From everyone. The woman I'd shared a bed with for 41 years had been keeping something important enough to hide in a secret compartment, something valuable enough for a stranger to come looking for it. What other secrets had my wife been keeping? And why did I have the growing feeling that Margaret had been preparing for something I was only beginning to understand? That night, I sat at Margaret's desk, surrounded by 41 years of financial records. Margaret had kept everything: bank statements, tax returns, investment documents, all filed in her precise manner. The coded message stared up at me. SS 4457 BH9 122 millisecond. I'd searched every account we owned. Nothing matched. Margaret had been conservative. Savings, checking, my modest retirement fund. Nothing fancy, nothing hidden. Or so I'd thought. My phone rang. David's name flashed on screen. "Dad, Jessica's upset. She says you caused trouble at the pawn shop." I almost laughed. Trying to recover my wife's stolen jewelry was causing trouble? I went to buy back your mother's locket. Someone else already purchased it. See? Problem solved. Time to move on. His casualness made my chest tighten. This was Margaret's son, the baby she'd rocked to sleep. "David, there was something hidden inside the locket. Your mother left me a message." Silence. Then, what kind of message? Something in his tone made me hesitate. This was the most interested David had sounded in anything about his mother since the funeral. "Just some numbers," I said carefully. "Probably nothing important. Maybe I should come over, help you figure it out." Now I laughed, bitter. "Yesterday you told me to stop living in the past. Today you want to help?" "I'm trying to be supportive." "By stealing her jewelry?" David sighed heavily. "Fine. Be stubborn. Don't come crying to me when you drive yourself crazy chasing ghosts." After hanging up, I stared at the phone. David's sudden interest was suspicious. He'd called Margaret's possessions worthless sentiment, unless they weren't just sentiment. I returned to the desk with a different approach. Margaret thought systematically, in logical progressions. SS could be Social Security, but our numbers didn't match. BH could be Boston Harbor, where we'd had our first date. The number 0922, September 22nd, my birthday. MS, Margaret Sullivan, her maiden name. The code included details only I would know. I searched online for 3 hours. Swiss banks use codes like this. So did offshore investment firms. Finally, I found it. Secure Solutions Investment Management, Cayman Islands. Their website was discreet, professional, catering to wealthy individuals seeking privacy. The login page required a client number and password. With trembling fingers, I typed SS4457. Valid account number appeared. Now I needed the password, something only I would know. I tried our wedding date, our address, my birthday. Nothing. Then I remembered the note. The day I knew I'd love him forever. Not my actual birthday. September 22nd was when we met at that Boston Harbor Jazz Festival. Margaret always said she knew that night she'd marry me. I typed 092248 and held my breath. Access granted. The screen that loaded made me gasp. Current account balance, $2,847,312. Margaret had hidden nearly $3 million from me for our entire marriage. I stared until the numbers burned into my vision. $2.8 million in an account I'd never known existed, hidden by a wife who'd convinced me we lived paycheck to paycheck. Every argument about money, every coupon I'd clipped, every generic brand we'd bought, all while Margaret had millions offshore. But as I clicked through the account history, one detail changed everything. The first deposit was made 3 months after David's gambling problems started. Margaret hadn't been hiding money from me. She'd been hiding it from David. Every deposit coincided with David's financial troubles. Every transfer happened when he'd asked us for money. Margaret had been systematically protecting our life savings from our own son. My wife hadn't betrayed me. She'd been saving me. I clicked on the account messages and found a folder labeled, "For Grant, Emergency Access Only." Inside was a video file uploaded 2 months before Margaret died. My finger hovered over play. Whatever Margaret had to say about this secret fortune, I wasn't ready. But alone at midnight, I needed answers. Margaret's face filled the screen. She was in our kitchen, looking tired but determined. "Grant, if you're watching this, I'm gone, and something's gone very wrong." Her voice was steady, but her eyes held sadness I hadn't noticed during her final months. "I hoped you'd never need this account, that we'd grow old together, and I'd tell you over Sunday dinner." She touched her locket. "The money started as Grandmother Sullivan's inheritance in 1981. I only told you about half of what she left," I remembered. The inheritance had seemed miraculous when David started college. "I've been protecting the rest from David." Margaret looked directly into the camera. "Our son has a gambling addiction. I've known for 3 years. The late-night calls, money requests, lies about investments. It's all been feeding casinos." 3 years of Margaret carrying this burden alone. I hired private investigator Thomas Chen. David owes over $180,000. He's taken fraudulent loans using false income information. Worse, he's researching how to have you declared incompetent. My own son planning to rob me. Thomas found evidence David's been asking lawyers about power of attorney in elder care facilities. He's been telling people you're becoming forgetful, preparing to have you committed. Recent awkward conversations with neighbors suddenly made sense. David and Jessica's comments about my memory, suggestions about getting help. I've been moving our money to safety. Every transaction is documented and legal. But if you're watching this, David has made his move. Thomas Chen has everything, Mins. Evidence of David's debts, recordings of his manipulation plans, proof of his fraudulent activities. She held up a small key. Safety deposit box 379 at First National. Thomas has the other key. Margaret's expression grew pained. David's been stealing from us for months. That antique furniture that got donated, the family silver that went missing, he's been selling everything piece by piece. I thought about items that had mysteriously disappeared. Margaret's china looking emptier, photo albums going missing. I'd assumed it was normal downsizing. "I love you, Grant. I'm sorry for this secret, but I needed to protect you. David is still our son, and maybe someday he'll find his way back. But until then, you're safe." The screen went black. Margaret hadn't just hidden money. She'd waged a secret war against our own son, carrying that burden until her heart gave out. Now it was my war to finish. 2 days after discovering Margaret's video, my doorbell rang at 8 in the morning. Through the peephole, I saw David and Jessica, back from Vegas earlier than expected. "Dad, we need to talk," David said as I opened the door. His eyes were bloodshot, and Jessica looked agitated. "How was your trip?" I asked, letting them into the kitchen. "Fine," Jessica snapped. "We came back early because we're concerned about you." Concerned? After stealing Margaret's locket to fund their gambling. "I'm perfectly fine." David sat at Margaret's place at the kitchen table, a violation that made my chest tighten. "Dad, you've been acting strange. Going to pawn shops, obsessing over Mom's things. Maybe it's time to consider getting some help." There it was. The setup Margaret had warned me about. What kind of help? Jessica exchanged a glance with David. "There are wonderful facilities that specialize in helping people through grief. Places where you wouldn't have to worry about managing finances or making difficult decisions." "You mean places where you'd have power of attorney over my assets?" The silence that followed was deafening. David's face went pale. "Dad, that's not—" "I know about your gambling debts, David. All $180,000 of them." Jessica's mouth fell open. David slumped in his chair like his strings had been cut. "I know about the fraudulent loans, the stolen family heirlooms, the lawyers you've consulted about having me declared incompetent." "How?" David whispered. "Your mother knew everything. She spent 3 years protecting me from you." I pulled out Thomas Chen's business card, watching David's face as he recognized the name. "She hired a private investigator. Every lie, every debt, every plan you made to steal from us. It's all documented." David looked like the little boy I'd once taught to ride a bike, confused and ashamed. Then Jessica's grip on his arm tightened, and the moment passed. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," David said. "These people don't just forget debts. They have ways of collecting. So you decided to collect from your own father. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I could get back on my feet. By having me committed to a nursing home?" Jessica stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're clearly not thinking straight. We're trying to help you." "Help me what? Disappear so you can liquidate everything I own?" "We should go," David muttered. But Jessica wasn't finished. "You're a bitter old man living in the past. Margaret's gone. Deal with it." The cruelty in her voice triggered something in me I hadn't felt since Margaret's diagnosis. A pure, focused rage. "Get out of my house. Dad, get out." They scrambled toward the door, but I wasn't done. "And David, your mother left me more than just money. She left me the tools to destroy you if you ever try this again." The door slammed behind them, leaving me alone with the echo of my own voice. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. Margaret's presence filled the kitchen, her love surrounding me like armor. The real battle was about to begin. The next morning brought chaos I hadn't seen since Margaret's diagnosis. My doorbell rang at 7:30, and through the peephole I saw 2 people in expensive suits holding briefcases. "Mr. Ellison?" "I'm Catherine Wells from Wells Morrison and Associates. This is my colleague David Kim. We represent your son David in some family legal matters." Family legal matters. That was one way to put attempted elder abuse. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "What can I do for you?" Catherine smiled with practiced warmth that probably cost $300 an hour. "Mr. Ellison, your son is concerned about your well-being. He's asked us to discuss some options that might benefit everyone involved." "Such as?" David Kim stepped forward, pulling out a tablet. "We understand you may have discovered some financial accounts that your late wife kept private. While we're sure she had good intentions, managing complex investments can be overwhelming during the grieving process." "Overwhelming? As if I hadn't spent 40 years managing finances as a professional accountant." "Your son could help shoulder that burden," Catherine continued. "We've drafted documents that would give David power of attorney over your financial decisions. Just temporarily, until you've had time to properly grieve." There it was. Exactly what Margaret's video had warned about. "And who determines when my grieving period is over?" "That would be at your discretion, naturally." "Naturally." I stepped back toward my door. "I think we're done here, Mr. Ellison." Catherine's voice sharpened. "Your son is prepared to file a petition with the court regarding your mental competency. He's concerned about some erratic financial decisions you've been making." "What erratic decisions?" "Accessing offshore accounts, conducting international financial transactions without professional guidance. To an outside observer, it might appear you're not thinking clearly." The threat was crystal clear. Sign over power of attorney voluntarily, or they'd have me declared incompetent by force. "You know what's interesting about threats?" I asked, leaning against my doorframe. "They only work if the person you're threatening doesn't have better lawyers than you do." Catherine's mask slipped slightly. "I beg your pardon? You can tell my son that his plan won't work." Margaret left me more than just money. She left me protection. I closed the door and immediately called the number from Margaret's files. Thomas Chen answered on the second ring. Mr. Chen, this is Grant Ellison. Margaret Ellison, widower. Mr. Ellison, I've been expecting your call. Margaret told me you might need my services someday. She did? About 6 months ago, Margaret asked me to prepare a comprehensive legal defense package in case anyone tried to challenge your competency or your right to her assets. Everything's ready to go. Margaret had been 3 steps ahead, even in death. How ready? By the time I'm done presenting evidence of your son's gambling debts, fraudulent loan applications, and attempts to manipulate an elderly family member, he'll be lucky if he doesn't face criminal charges. For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely. Mr. Chen, I think it's time to make some phone calls. Within hours, Thomas had contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, and the IRS. Margaret's evidence was so comprehensive that by afternoon, federal agents were obtaining warrants. That evening, I sat on my back porch watching 3 black SUVs pull up to David and Jessica's house across town. Through my binoculars, I watched FBI agents carry boxes of evidence from their front door. My phone rang. David's number. Dad, what did you do? I protected myself, I said calmly, watching agents load computers into their vehicles. What you should have done for your family instead of trying to rob them. This will destroy us. You destroyed yourselves. I just documented it. Margaret's war was almost over. Justice was finally coming for the Ellison family. 3 weeks after the FBI raids, I received a call that changed everything. Mr. Ellison, this is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. We have someone here who wants to return something that belongs to you. That afternoon, I sat in the federal building downtown, watching as a man in his 60s entered the conference room. He was well-dressed with the careful posture of someone accustomed to authority. In his hands was a small velvet jewelry box. Mr. Ellison, I'm Richard Torres, retired federal marshal. I'm the one who purchased your wife's locket from Murphy's pawn shop. I stared at the box, my heart racing. How did you know to find me? Richard smiled and placed the box on the table between us. Because Margaret Ellison hired me 15 years ago to protect this locket if anything ever happened to her. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Mr. Torres has been working with us as part of our investigation into your son's activities. I don't understand. Your wife was more prepared than you know, Richard said, opening the velvet box to reveal Margaret's locket. She contracted me to monitor David's financial activities and protect certain assets if he ever tried to harm you. He turned the locket over and pressed a hidden mechanism. A second compartment opened, smaller than the first. Inside was a micro SD card. Margaret documented everything, Mr. Ellison. Every conversation David had about your supposed mental decline. Every meeting with lawyers about power of attorney. Every plan to liquidate your assets. Agent Martinez inserted the SD card into her laptop. The screen filled with folders labeled by date and subject. Audio recordings, video files, financial documents, even photographs of David meeting with gambling associates. Your wife spent 2 years building an airtight case against your son, she explained. Bank records showing David's escalating debts, recordings of him discussing plans to have you committed, evidence of systematic theft from your home. I listened to my own son's voice discussing my deteriorating mental state with lawyers, planning which nursing home would be cheapest, calculating how quickly he could liquidate my assets. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined possible. There's more, Richard said quietly. Margaret left specific instructions about what would happen if David ever acted on his plans. He handed me a legal document. If David had succeeded in having you declared incompetent, this trust would have activated. Every gambling debt he owed, every fraudulent loan he'd taken, would have been consolidated and transferred to his personal liability. Thomas Chen, who had arrived during the presentation, whistled softly. She set a trap. Any attempt to steal from you would have destroyed David financially. Your wife loved you enough to wage a secret war against your own son, Agent Martinez said, and she won. Richard closed the locket and placed it in my hands. Margaret asked me to tell you something if this day ever came. She said you were always stronger than you believed, and she just wanted to make sure you had the tools to prove it. The weight of the locket felt different now, not just as Margaret's memory, but as proof of her love and protection. What happens to David and Jessica now? I asked. Agent Martinez consulted her notes. David faces federal fraud charges carrying up to 10 years in prison. Jessica has agreed to testify against him in exchange for a reduced sentence. Their business assets have been seized to pay restitution to their victims. And their gambling debts? Those creditors will have to get in line with everyone else David defrauded. 6 months later, I stood in Boston Municipal Court as the judge read David's sentence: 4 years in federal prison, full restitution to all victims, and permanent prohibition from managing anyone else's finances. David looked at me as they led him away, and for just a moment I saw the little boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who'd chosen greed over family. Walking out of the courthouse with Margaret's locket around my neck, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. Margaret's war was finally over, and we had won. 8 months after David's sentencing, I was preparing dinner in my new lakeside home when the doorbell rang. Through the window I saw a young woman with familiar eyes and a nervous smile. "Grandpa Grant?" "It's Emma, David's daughter." I hadn't seen my granddaughter since Margaret's funeral. She was 24 now, finishing her master's degree in social work, but Jessica had made sure to cut me off from the grandchildren along with everyone else. I opened the door wide. "Emma, what a wonderful surprise." I know I should have called first. She was twisting her hands nervously. "I heard about Dad and Jessica, about what they did to you. I wanted to apologize." "You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart." "I do, though." I knew something was wrong. Dad kept asking weird questions about Grandma Margaret's finances, and Jessica was always making comments about your memory. I should have said something. I studied my granddaughter's face, seeing Margaret's honesty there along with David's features, but none of his selfishness. "Come in. Let's talk." Over dinner, Emma told me about her work with elderly clients, her engagement to a pediatric nurse, and her guilt about her father's crimes. "I keep thinking I should visit him in prison," she said. "But I'm so angry about what he did to you in Grandma's memory." "Anger is normal. But David is still your father. How can you not hate him?" I thought about Margaret's video message, about the choice between bitterness and peace. Because hate would mean he still had power over me. I choose healing instead. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I missed you so much. Jessica told everyone you were getting confused, that you didn't want to see us anymore. I never stopped wanting to see you, and I never will." As Emma helped me clear the dishes, she paused at Margaret's photo on the mantel. "I always wondered why Grandma Margaret wore that locket every single day. She must have really treasured it." I smiled, touching the locket now, hanging around my own neck. She treasured what it protected. "What do you mean?" I told Emma everything. About the hidden compartments, the offshore account, Margaret's secret war to protect me from her own son. Emma listened with growing amazement. "Grandma knew all along what Dad was planning. Your grandmother was the smartest person I ever knew. She spent 2 years making sure I'd be safe, even after she was gone." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "What happened to all that money?" I led her to the window overlooking the lake. "See that construction across the water? That's the new Margaret Ellison Children's Wing at Boston General Hospital. Your grandmother's protection money is helping sick children get better. She would have loved that." She did love it. It was her idea, actually. She left specific instructions that if we ever defeated David's plans, the money should go to help children. Emma hugged me tightly. "I want to be part of your life again, Grandpa. I want to hear stories about Grandma. And I want you to meet my fiancé. I'd love that more than anything." That evening, after Emma left with promises to visit every week, I sat on my back porch watching the sunset over the lake. Margaret's locket rested warm against my chest, keeping perfect time with my heartbeat. The greatest love stories aren't about passion or romance. They're about protection, about someone loving you enough to fight battles you don't even know you're facing. Margaret had spent her final years preparing for a war I never saw coming, ensuring that her death wouldn't leave me defenseless against our own son's greed. Some people spend their whole lives looking for that kind of love. I was lucky enough to carry it with me every day for 41 years, and now I'd carry it for whatever time I had left. Grant's story proves that even in our darkest moments, God provides the wisdom and strength we need to overcome betrayal. These betrayal stories remind us that sometimes the people we love most can become our greatest challenges, yet divine love never abandons us. Margaret's secret protection plan shows how God works through those who truly love us, creating shields we don't even know exist. Like many Grandpa stories of resilience, Grant discovered that age brings not weakness, but the clarity to see truth through deception. The most inspiring Grandpa stories teach us that experience becomes our greatest weapon against those who underestimate our strength. When family betrayal stories unfold, they often reveal that God has been preparing us for battles we never saw coming. Margaret's locket held more than memories. It contained proof that love transcends death and continues protecting us through divine providence. Her final gift wasn't just money, but the knowledge that God never leaves his children defenseless against evil, even when it wears a familiar face. If this story resonates with your own experiences of family challenges or unexpected protection, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you witnessed love that continues guiding you even after loss? Share this message with anyone who needs to remember that God's protection often comes through the devotion of those who truly cherish us. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate faith, family bonds, and the miraculous ways divine love shields us from harm.